I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I am so excited to bring this guest to you. Today, I have Zak Foster. Woo, baby. I'm so excited for this one. Zak is just incredible. He creates some amazing quilts and art and just really loves to play with textiles, and it's evident in the work he creates. So we talk about so many things in this episode, as always, very conversational. We just chit chat about life and values and what brings us joy and what charges our batteries. And in all that, we do also talk about his online community called the Quilty Nook, which is an incredible place where you can just hang out, meet other quilters, and um, you know, get encouraged and learn new things. And Zak also just recently released his first book called The World Needs Your Next Quilt. It is available to purchase through his website, so go check that out. I've got my copy. I am so excited to dig into it and just take on a new perspective in quilting. And we talk about where the book kind of ideas came from and how it came to life. So that's exciting. And Zak just has a lovely presence online. And so if you ever need some kind of philosophical hot takes, he's always dropping little nuggets of wisdom or offering, moments of reflection and thought on his Instagram. So go check that out. And it's Zak, Z-A-K. There's no C, no H, like he says. And yeah, so I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. I hope you guys have a great holiday season. This is the last episode for 2024. I can't believe it. We're here, and I can't wait to see you guys in the new year. So please enjoy Zak. Hi, Zak. How are you?
Hi, Amanda. Good morning. Good morning. I'm fine. I'm sitting here on top of the Cumberland Plateau in the middle of Tennessee. It's
Nice.
a seasonal 60 some degrees today. But
Wow.
what that means is I'm feeling cute. The little birds outside, the little titmice on my front porch, they're feeling cute. They're all at the bird feeder. And so I'm just happy to be sitting here chatting with you. Thank you for this invitation.
Yeah, I'm so happy to finally get to chat with you. And I've been, like long time follower, first time caller kind of thing.
Amazing.
So this is really fun. I'm really excited for this chat. So, um, yeah, you've just been doing so many amazing things, and you've got your little philosophical hot takes that you drop to us on Instagram, and I love that. So it always gives me something to think about. So, but before we dive into anything else, I just want to know how you even got into sewing and quilting in the first place.
Ooh, well, I always tell people that careful when you make your first baby quilt because it's a gateway drug. Because that's definitely what happened to me. I have always been an artist for a long time. I was born an artist. Thank you,
Mm,
Mama. And I dabbled in so many different media, drawing, painting, screen printing, photography, all the things. And so when I sat down to make that first baby quilt for Lowell Michael, who's now probably, I need to do the math, but my quilting career will always be as long as Michael is old. I can tell you that much. Um, when I sat down to make that quilt, I assumed it was going to be a one off, but then I got an idea for a second quilt. Some of your listeners might know what that's like. And then I'm in the
mhm.
work on a second quilt, and it turns into a third quilt. And it's been like 15 some years now. So
Okay.
I'm hooked. I think what got me started is, the things you hear people talk a lot about, like the intersection of beauty and utility. I
Mm,
love making something that not only pleases the eye, but pleases the soul, and it's something that we can use.
yeah.
But also, a more recent insight that I've had was talking with my good friend Jessica Wool, who is here at Swanee, where I'm living. She's a fellow quilter, and we were talking about our experience spending so much time on smartphones. And
Mm,
I was like, oh, interesting. Because if you were to go back in my timeline, I got my first iPhone. And then about a year later, I started sewing. And I think that there has to be some kind of connection for me there between all this swiping on this like smooth, perfect glass that's not giving my finger much feedback at all.
mhm.
And then touching fabric, getting involved with textiles, something that you can touch that's soft, that's malleable, manipulable, can
Hmm.
bring warmth and comfort, right? Like I think for me, there was a direct connection between the growing proportion of technology in my life and in my day to day, and
Yeah.
the simultaneous increase in the desire to have something that I could just hold, touch, and feel soft about, you know?
Yeah. 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 I can I can imagine that. Like, yeah, I mean, I've always had, yeah, like crafting and crafty things around and not necessarily sewing, but I mean, here and there in small capacity bits, but I was always terrified of my mom's sewing machine. And I don't think she had the patience to deal with my anxiety about it. So she was just like, whatever, don't sew then, you know? So then
Mhm.
when I finally did start in like 2017, she was like, oh, now you want to sew? I'm like, yeah, I do actually.
Better late than never, Amanda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I think, we've all got our journeys into how we found quilting, and whatever led us here is there was purpose for it in our lives, and now we're at this point where it serves a huge purpose and it's all consuming, and I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it too.
Yeah.
Honestly, I said better late than never, but really how I feel about that is you're always right on time.
Mhm.
Like it was, you weren't ready for quilting and quilting wasn't ready for you
Right.
until it was. And then it was the
Exactly.
perfect moment.
Yeah,
So here we are.
exactly. Yeah. And like
Mhm.
I've crocheted, and so I've always had something tactile, some kind of tactile hobby to do. But when I got into quilting, I was just like, oh, I see now. It's like
Yeah.
stepping through these gates that had formerly been hidden to me, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this has been here this whole time.
Right, right.
But like you said, I wasn't ready for it then, and now I am. So it's good. It's been good. But that's that's so funny because you like, yeah, baby quilts are usually the gateway for entering into the world of quilting, because people think, oh, I want to make my friend a baby quilt, and then they're like, welcome, come on in, you're here for life.
Exactly.
Whether it sticks in
Exactly.
that moment or it's a few more years down the road, it seems like that's kind of where people get sucked in a lot of times. So that's so funny.
And I think there's something about quilting, Amanda, that is for me personally, and I think for many people, is like that really sweet balance between limitation and possibility, right?
Hmm.
Like a quilt, traditionally defined as 3 layers, it's made of fabric, as da 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 da. Those are a limitation,
Hmm.
right? So we don't have to think about those things. For the most part, we're just gonna like adopt that and then come in the possibilities and the options.
Yeah.
And that's where we can play with how we pick our colors and arrange our compositions and choose our materials, right?
Hmm.
So I've really enjoyed just that, is that sweet spot between I can do anything I want,
Hmm.
but also if I go too far in one direction, is it even a quilt anymore? I don't
Right.
know. But I
Yeah.
also do enjoy pushing those boundaries. So it's all of the above, really.
Yeah. And how do you find that openness of, and like almost endless possibilities? Does it stifle you at all ever, or is that where you thrive?
Well, I think you need to picture me in a thrift shop, walking up and down the aisles of whether it's the old bed sheets or the men's dress shirts or whatever it is. And I'm looking with my eyes, but I'm also touching everything simultaneous. And I'm waiting for those two to sync up, right? Like my
Mm,
eye liking something and my fingers responding well to it. And then from that moment, the inspiration comes. So is it
mm,
stifling? Absolutely not. But I'm also not trying to force things. I just go around with my eyes open and my hands out, looking for that point of entry.
yeah.
And I probably don't need to tell quilters this. Like, I mean, inspiration's all over the place. So it doesn't take long doing a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and then the
Yeah.
ideas start flowing.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I think sometimes I get a little bit frozen with too much openness. Like I want some kind of guidelines, but that's kind of in my nature of like the control I need to feel, I guess. I don't know. But it's
Well, this is
no, go ahead.
okay. this is where I think a lot about what my good friend Heidi Parks says, and your listeners are probably familiar with Heidi Parks's work. She says no one quilt has to be the quilt, right?
Right.
Like you're allowed to make another quilt after this one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can make
Yeah.
this one as beautiful as this particular quilt can be, and then everything that didn't fit into that quilt, you can fit into the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that permission that she gives there.
Yeah. That is nice. And yeah, remembering that you don't have to be done after this one. This isn't your, piece de resistance. Like maybe you have a quilt that is that, but you never really know which quilt that's going to be at the time. So it's
And
kind of
I'll give you a great example, especially the more over the last 2 years, my style has moved a little bit from, we'll call it, patchwork to applique, right?
mhm.
So I'm still doing some piecing, but it's really just a lot of layering of applique. And I just became an uncle about 3 weeks ago, which I'm
Oh,
really excited about.
congratulations.
Thank you. It's a whole new era for our family. First foster born in 4 decades. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Wow.
And so, of course, I got to make baby a quilt. I got to go back to my roots and make baby a quilt. And so I'm working on this quilt, largely applique, and I'm rushing to get it done because I was going to go see them, for the weekend. I want to be
Mhm.
able to give them that quilt. And I look at it that morning on the way out the door, and I'm like, this quilt's just not ready yet. And I'd hated
Mm,
it because I'd rushed so hard to like get it to a place where I could give it to them. And because of the way that like I've built this quilt, I will continue adding to it, even though it's
okay.
already quilted, bound, everything, right? Like I can continue layering.
Mhm.
And just leaving that door open a little bit in the creative
Mhm.
process for me is really helpful because it frees me up from having to make like it frees me up from having to perfect the vision from step one, and it
Right.
allows me to be in the process of perfecting the quilt and manifesting the quilt with every single decision that I'm making along the way, including after I think it's already done, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great perspective because I think sometimes when you're piecing a quilt, you follow a pattern, you get it all done, you quilt it, you bind it, and you're like, I can't change anything about this quilt now. But with the beauty of applique, you can do whatever you
Mm.
want.
And even if you're working primarily with patchwork, there have
Hmm.
been pieces where I step back and I look at that patchwork and I'm like, oh, I really wish that square were green or whatever, you know?
Hmm.
Well, don't tell the quilt police, but just go applique a little green square on top of that block and no one's going to be any smarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that idea.
I like it. And the quilt police have no business here, so we just say
Not
whatever
in
we
my
want.
house.
No, we do. We just do whatever we want. And I think that's
Hmm.
the greatest part, like, because like I said, I crafted before, but when I started quilting, there was like a whole different confidence that I gained from learning everything from start to finish. So, at first I was just piecing tops and then my friends would help me finish because they could long arm and I couldn't yet. And then about a year in, I finally was like, I need to learn how to long arm. So I went to my local shop, I took the class, and then I was in that shop all the time, just finishing quilts. And my mom and I were like, this is crazy. We should just buy our own machine.
Hmm.
Hence the
Hmm.
start of our business. But it was very quick. And I was like, I want all of it. And then for a little while I went back to that quilt shop and was teaching the long arming certification class a little bit, and that's where I got to like pull in my teaching, and then also my skills of I've long armed hundreds of quilts at this point, and getting to teach other people that, and because there is a rigidity, you're like, I need this to look perfect, and I'm like, but you're a person, you're not a
Hmm.
machine. Like, you're using a
Hmm.
machine, but you're still a person, and every little like wobble and every little like imperfection that's not exactly what that pantograph looks like is you. That's your touch in this quilt. And so like feeding this advice to these women and like teaching them like how to use these machines to finish their own quilts, and I'm like, oh, I should probably take my own advice and like not be so rigid about everything must be perfect. And anyway, it's but the like yeah, that confidence that came from that and being able to look at things and go, oh, I could turn that into a quilt, I think, or I could take that concept and I
Mhm.
could feed that into some kind of patchwork pattern, or I could applique that. I've done so much applique recently also, and for other people's projects, but if they're like, I need this fancy thing, I'm like, I got it. And I figure out how to applique it and I do it. And that's been really fun too, because it's again one of those pieces that if you're coming out of just piecing patchworks, then the thought of applique is like, oh wait, this is a whole new world. It's a whole
It
new
certainly is.
avenue in the city of quilting. So
It's
anyway.
it's it's opened up my practice quite a bit. And I love so much of what I'm hearing you share in your story and your experience there with gaining confidence because I found something similar to be true. And in fact, so I should let people know I have a podcast as well. It's
Mm,
on temporary hiatus because I just had a big life move from New York after 15 years to Tennessee. But it
wow.
is coming back in 2025.
Oh,
And
cool.
on that show, which I call Seamside, which is like a reference to like the
The fire
backside
side.
of a quilt top
Oh, okay.
before you sew it down, right?
Yeah.
So our focus on Seamside is to explore what I call the inner work of textiles, like how working with fabric works its way into us as people
Hmm.
and moves us around, recombines us, and reprograms us in ways. I mean, I know that for me, quilting, and especially improv quilting, has been, I mean, I can just say I am not the same person today that I was 15 years ago,
Right.
right? I like to think that, I mean, I often think back to pre quilting Zach, and I think, oh, he was a very good Virgo, right? Like he
Yeah.
was perfectionist, checklist, da da da. And I still have all of those traits, but I
Sure.
like to think that I've quilting has helped me kind of like shift them to the center. And
Hmm.
now I'm much more my moon sign, which is Aquarius, dreamer, community
Hmm.
builder, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's that fabrics give us quilting, improv quilting especially, give us this kind of like soft laboratory space that
Hmm.
we can listen to that still inner voice. We can decide what do I like, and it doesn't matter if no one else likes it.
Hmm.
We can take risk, and if
Hmm.
they don't pay off, guess what? It's just fabric, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then those moments of discerning our own personal preferences and honing our own creative voice and taking creative risk don't just stay in that quilt, don't just stay in our sewing room. We carry them out to other aspects of our lives as
Yeah.
well. And so now I look around and I look around at just various aspects of my life, my friendships, my relationships, my professional life, how I move through the woods when I'm on a hike.
Hmm.
It's it's informed by my quilting practice. In
Hmm.
that improv quilting has taught me to keep my eyes open and I move through the world with that same sensibility or the same curiosity, I should say, right?
Yeah.
I move through the world just waiting to see what's going to happen, and then I'll respond. I try not to. It's hard, right? It goes back to what you were saying a moment ago. It's much
Yeah.
easier to say something than to do something, but
Yeah.
I do try to maintain a curiosity and not pre-program myself in a situation and
Hmm.
just treat it like it's improv quilting. I'm gonna do
Yeah.
one thing, see how that works, and I'm gonna do another thing, and that for me has just been the beautiful life gift that quilting has given me, right? And then I love exploring with others as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. It really does open up a whole different piece of who you are and helps you highlight the kind of hidden bits, I think, because I think, yeah, there's parts of quilting that are kind of set in stone, rigid, like you said, it's three layers. How you make those layers is completely up to you, but that's still there. And like the basics are there for you to lean on in in the times of uncertainty, but you can always branch out from those. And so I think, yeah, refocusing and recentering and finding that kind of figure outable piece of whatever the problem is. And it's, yeah, it's been an incredible journey. It's like personal journey, not just that I have so many cool skills now and I can make a lot of really cool things, but just that like as a person, it's just it changes you. It makes you look at things so differently. So that's incredible.
to what extent, Amanda, would you say that, because you and I have in common that we're both former educators, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I taught high school Spanish, so totally
Oh,
unrelated to quilting, for
wow.
18 years.
Wow.
And I left that about 3 years ago to pursue
Okay.
life as a full-time artist, as a wandering vagabond storyteller and community gatherer. And I've never looked back, but I would have never have been able to even conceive of this kind of life
Hmm.
if it weren't with my experience with fabric. Have you found the same to be true through your transition?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I taught third grade for 8 years. I graduated high school, college a little later.
Uh-huh.
Feels like it took
Congratulations on
forever.
high school. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And um, and as much as I made it my whole personality. Like I did other things. I crocheted, I still had my hobbies and whatever, but I'm a teacher. That was my personality. And so when I started getting to the point where I was feeling like I was just hitting a wall and my mental health was suffering, my physical health was suffering. Um, and we had this business. My mom was mostly running it and I would help on the my breaks, but I was just like I wanted more. I just spend my days at school daydreaming about being able to just quilt and, help my mom work with her. And um I just got to a point where my husband was like, "You're very clearly unhappy. Like you come home crying more often than you don't." um And I just realized it was such a toxic environment for my growth, for my health, that if I didn't leave, I wasn't ever going to be able to heal the things that I needed to heal. And so, yeah, that leap of faith and trust in myself and belief in myself that I could make something of this business and that I could be successful outside of that, and working with my therapist to adjust my expectations for myself, and understanding that my job isn't my personality. I mean, quilting, like I said, is all consuming, but I like to adopt the perspective that Brene Brown offers in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And she says you can be a slashy. You can be a quilter slash educator slash podcast host slash wife slash mother slash, it's like all these things that you are. You don't lose all of that just because you take on a role in a job or because you start a new hobby. You don't lose those other bits of yourself. So pulling all of it together and trying to encompass all of it in the same space and let it inform your decisions in whatever kind of mode you're in, whatever hat you're wearing at that moment, I think really also opened my perspective on that too, because I didn't know how to not have my job be my personality. So that was interesting. And yeah, I just completely opened my brain to let so many other things in and let myself just be and exist and be okay with what I like and be okay with setting boundaries. And that was another piece that crazily fell into place because of owning a business and having to say no sometimes. Because if I said yes to every request, I think I would have quit quilting altogether. So yeah, it's been a ride for sure. And I quit. I think this was my yeah, it's been 3.5 years since I stopped.
Ooh,
So we're on kind of the same timeline as far as when we
we
stopped
certainly
teaching,
are.
but my goodness, I needed to. And I'm
You and me
so
both.
yeah.
And, I think if we could just envision the perfect world together for a moment, I think it
Mhm.
would look something like each of us being able to bring our full selves, our talents, and our strengths and our insights into the way we spend most of our day, right?
Yeah,
Like whether that's a
absolutely.
job, a paid job, or something else, right?
Mhm.
And for me personally, like right now, the things I love most about teaching, I still get to do in my role, right? As
Mm.
like because I host an online community called the Quilty Nook for quilters all over the world, and
Yeah.
I love that I still get to like organize community and like bring like fun, engaging, relevant activities to bring people together. Like all that just feels so good.
Hmm.
But in my capacity as a public school teacher, that same skill came with a bunch of other things that drained my mortal battery, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the
Yeah.
perfect world that we're envisioning together, this life that I get to live now
Hmm.
is better suited to my gifts and my skill sets. And I would love to see a world where everybody would have access to make those kind of moves in their own life that want to, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just the work that I get to do now. If teaching in public school was depleting my mortal battery, this is still work, but it feels like capital W work, like good work, and
Yeah.
it feels like something that feeds the battery as opposed to drain it. And so it's a beautiful place to be, and I wish the
Yeah.
same for everybody that wants it.
Yeah, absolutely. So were you teaching in New York and so did you stop teaching and then move immediately, or was it like a slower transition?
We stayed in New York for a couple years after I stopped teaching.
Okay.
And it was a wild time because it was a small one bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, about
Oh,
900 square feet. The reason the Quilty Nook is called the Quilty Nook is because my studio, my sewing room, was really just the eat-in portion of our eat-in kitchen. So maybe like a
okay.
8 by 10 space, like not big at all.
Yeah.
And I called that space the Quilty Nook. That's the original Nook. And so when it came
Okay.
time to start the community, I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
already got a name for it. So, but no, we moved about 3 months ago to Tennessee, and I had to
Okay.
leave the brick and mortar Nook behind. It is now in the good hands of a actor for the theater and the playwright, which feels
Ooh.
very positive. And
Yeah.
now we're picking up where we left off, just down here in Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay. And does that feel, yeah, does the pace of Tennessee feel more suited to your artist life now than that kind of hustle and bustle of New York, or did that feed it in a different way?
I'm going to say that when I first got to Tennessee, that for the first time in a long time, I got to experience the luxury of open-ended time
Mm,
that I don't feel in a rush to be anywhere generally. I don't feel that I'm constantly having to turn down invitations to do things and be places, which made me feel bad because I do like being with people, but I just,
r-
similar to you can't say yes to everything. And in a place like New
right.
York, there's always something to do. Whereas in a place like Swanee, where we have one blinking stoplight, um, there just literally aren't invitations to do those things, which to me feels really good. It
Yeah.
feels like a luxury to say there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I use nothing very loosely, of course, in the most poetic sense possible,
Right.
because it's time to sew, it's time to connect with other people, it's time to walk in the woods, it's time to get to know the birds in my yard, so many things that just so satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I think anytime I visit a bigger city, I when I come home, because I mean Boise's a okay sized city. We're about 200,000. Um, and in the valley overall, there's like probably 500,000, but um I don't really know the numbers, but anyway, but it's
Sound
safe.
good to me.
Yeah, it's safe. It's pretty relatively quiet. There's not a ton of traffic. There's stuff to do, but it's not like a constant like, oh, we gotta go here, we gotta go do this, gotta go do that. And so coming home feels very like that. Like I can breathe, I can take a breath, I can relax, I don't have to look over my shoulder or like clutch my purse or, just things that you kind of have to do in a bigger city when just to protect yourself because the more people there are, the more anomalies there are, the more kind of chaotic energy exists. And so, yeah, I sometimes
And
take
at the
it.
same time, all that is true. And at the same time, there are more people looking out for you in a
Well,
big
that's
city.
true. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, like, classic example, classic. Anyone that's been in the subways in New York will recognize probably what I'm about to say. And that is you see somebody pushing a stroller with a kid in it
Mm,
and they got to go up a set of stairs. Looking around, you wouldn't think anybody else hustling and bustling is paying attention. But I guarantee you, when that person gets to the bottom of the stairs with that child in the stroller, somebody will reach down and grab the front wheel of that stroller and help the person up the stairs.
right.
Because we're constantly watching and making sure everybody's okay, whether
Hmm.
you actively sense it or not.
Right.
Once you start looking, you see it happening quite a bit, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that because it's like that's how you get along there, right? That's how you have to exist in that space is to be on the lookout, right? And so whether depends on what you're looking for too. I think some people who look for the bad, that's what they see.
Mhm.
But if you it's kind of like that Mr. Rogers, like if you look for the helpers, if you look for the
Mhm.
people who are looking out for others as well, like you'll see that everywhere too. And that's what I love about this place too, is it feels very like community and everybody's friendly here. I shouldn't say
Mhm.
everybody because that's generous, but for the most part, I mean, we run an Airbnb out of our master suite in the downstairs of our house, and so we always have guests coming in from out of town, and they're always like, "Everybody's so nice here." I'm like, "Welcome to our paradise."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I don't want to talk too highly about it because I don't need everybody moving here and making it too busy, but
uh,
I'll encourage people to come visit. No. Anyway, but yeah,
save your
I
Airbnb.
yeah, yeah, come hang out with me. It's called the Cozy Quilt House, so you can
Ooh,
come cozy up with my quilts and hang out with my cat and drink my coffee. Um,
oof, amazing.
it's a fun time over here. But anyway, so I love that kind of connecting to that feeling of like you can breathe fresh air, you can slow down and take your time and you don't have to yeah, there's not constant invitations of like, let's go do this, let's go do this, let's go do this. And although it's fun, it's like, okay, it's time to turn inward and kind of focus on what's happening right here, in my body, around my body, who's in my circle and how am I nurturing that? And it gets very it gets hard sometimes. And then it's like I'll reach a limit and I have to snap back and be like, oh, I went too far. I need to come back and recenter and refocus and find my center again so that I can then start reaching out again. But if you don't feel like you have the space or the time or the capacity to do that, it's hard. And like
Absolutely.
it drains your battery, like you were saying. So
Well, I think one of the secrets to a happy life might be to just constantly recalibrate, right? Like, because for me, for example, what that might mean is I get really excited about a lot of things. And so on my metaphorical stove of life, I'm just constantly putting on more and more pots. And there has to
mhm,
come a point where I take a few pots off the stove, right? Because
right.
there's only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I think is so perfect about this time of year, right? It is this chance to say, okay, what's worked well for me this year? How can I do things differently that work better for my flow, my energy, and my goals moving forward into the new year? I mean, I know I'm already thinking those conversations for myself because I'm starting two huge projects next year.
Mm,
But it can work. I just need to make some room for them.
yeah. Yeah. I think that yeah, that recentering, recalibrating is like the quintessential piece too. Yeah, like you said, living a happy life and remembering what your own purpose is and what your own kind of what do you want out of this ride? Like we're only here for a short time, so like what's like why are you saying no to that thing or why are you saying yes to that thing? What purpose is it serving? Is it moving you closer to the ultimate kind of goal you want for, your the longevity of your life and can it help you get somewhere new and kind of saying yes to scary things is it's like why are you scared of it? Is it mortally like scary or is it just because it's a new thing and maybe you're doubting yourself and it's almost like that's the thing you need to look in the face and maybe say yes to.
It can be hard, though, can it, to tell the difference between um, fear, like true fear that keeps us safe,
Hmm.
and fear of failing,
Hmm.
right? That just maybe has personal, emotional consequences, or maybe some social consequences, but
Yeah.
which are real,
Hmm.
but also we'll live through it, and it might be worth taking the gamble. You know,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
of a Mae West quote that I ran across recently that just keeps like just going through my mind several times a day is you only live once, but if you do it right, that's more than enough.
Mm,
I think I'm quoting Miss West correctly. I hope I got that right. You only live once, but if you do it right, that's more than enough. And I love how she managed in that one sentence to encapsulate the brevity of life, the fact that life is short,
hmm.
but that art is long, right? That we can put structures, things, objects, relationships into place while we're alive that will continue to do the work long after we're gone.
Yeah.
That's what I hope. That's how I try to orient my daily schedule to be in line with my life schedule, to make sure
Yeah.
those things happen. I'm working on my purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of do a personal moral inventory of what your values are and what it is that you're trying to accomplish and achieve. And it's not all about achievements, but in the sense of like, I'm trying to achieve a harmonious home life. I'm trying to achieve a peace in my home that cannot be disturbed by anybody else. And and to me, like that's where my values are going to be centered. So if you hear me saying no to something or if you hear me saying yes to something, it's because to me it's either going to teach me something new so I can get outside of my box, or it's going to improve the harmony of my home. And so that I think we know what our values are, but like I mentioned my husband's getting his counseling master's, which I've said a million times on this show. So I'm sorry to my listeners who've already heard this 1,000 times. But
We're just
I'm
excited to be on that journey with him.
yeah.
That's wonderful.
I mean, honestly, it's been so great because I've learned so much along with him and doing my own therapy, but just learning and reading books and listening to just different experts in the field. And anyway, one of the things that he's kind of talked about as he's in his internship and working with clients and talking to people is people don't really know why they have the values that they say they have. And so it's been an interesting thing that he's been exploring with other people, but also that he and I have been exploring. Like we've kind of always known our values, but at the same time, I think they can change. And I think coming out of teaching and taking on, you know, trying to grow this business, the quilting business with my mom, and then I just this summer bought it out from my parents. And so now it's just me and like what are my values and why are they there and am I working under conditions that allow me to keep my values at the forefront of what I do, and am I engaging with other quilters or other influences out there that align with my values and help me further that kind of exploration of those values. And so there were some clients I just kind of had to say no to because at the end of the day I was like, our values don't align and I don't feel good about contributing to whatever this is. And so it's just been an interesting journey. And I don't know if has you had to readjust as you've moved out of New York or adjust as you've moved out of teaching? Do you find your values have shifted at all, or do you feel like they're more in focus?
I would say I feel like they haven't so much shifted as clarified or deepened, right? I
Okay.
feel like it can be really hard to know what you want
Mm-hmm.
when you're exhausted, when you feel insecure, when you're really busy.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a capitalist society that is constantly telling us what we should want. So we're not even practiced really as a culture of thinking about like, what do I want to want? Right?
Mm-hmm.
We get messages all day long in 1,000 different ways, showing us different ways to live our life.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're so busy, I think that it can be hard to know which one of those paths we want to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Or because we're so busy, it can be hard to tune into that inner voice to know which path we're going to follow. And so I think I mean, I've only been in Tennessee for 3 months, so it's,
Sure.
the jury's still out. But it with this more open time and slower pace, I do have more time for reflective practice, which usually looks like me sitting in a rocking chair on my porch, listening to the birds as they come and go.
I like
Um,
it.
yeah, but that time is where what's important to me has a chance to bubble back to the top of
Mhm.
my awareness. And then once it's there, I can make a choice to move parts of my day around to nurture that priority or to find a better time to nurture it on down the road, you know.
Mhm.
But that's hard to do if you got a lot on your mind, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. I think
Certainly.
the noise of capitalism can kind of get in the way of a lot of that. And like you were saying before, kind of that perfect world where people can live in the space of doing the things that bring them joy and nurture their soul and fill their battery and do all the things that make them happy and help them push them in a good way and grow them. It's like it seems impossible in the way we've set things up in our society. And so when it almost feels like a quiet act of rebellion for those of us who have found another way. and 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 I think there can be a world where we reimagine what that looks like, where, maybe our basic needs are met so that we don't have to worry about making our jobs our entire personality or focusing so hard on what other people's values are so we can make them more money in the sense of, being a cog in the machine of a giant business. But I don't know. It feels like yeah, it feels like a fever dream sometimes to think of that world. But I want it to exist because I think I'm happier. My husband's happier. You seem happier.
Mm,
And like the people that I've encountered that I engage with that have kind of stepped back from that grind of going to work every day, or even if they go to work every day, they've taken a step back and chosen something different than what they thought they wanted because they found it didn't align or it wasn't
mm,
bringing them joy. So they found something where they can make money and it brings them more joy. So yeah, it feels kind of a little bit rebellious, but in a good way.
yeah. In the living, breathing, pulsing kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I take a lot of heart in the idea that as entrenched as this world feel, like this system, this culture, this setup feels,
Mhm.
it was put into place by people, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
anything that other people have done, you and I can do, right?
Right.
Like we can dream something different and we can make that dream happen. Like I was talking to my buddy Gregory a couple months ago, and we were talking about the idea that when you're in a human made environment, like this room I'm in now, like the room you're in now,
Hmm.
when you look around you at all these objects were at one point in time just an idea in someone else's mind. So when
Hmm.
we're living in these human made environments, we are living in a world of other people's ideas. And that's neither positive or negative. It just is what it is. You're living
Right.
surrounded by other people's ideas.
Yeah.
By contrast, when you go out into a natural environment that has not been significantly altered by humans, all of those human ideas, other people's ideas, have a
Hmm.
chance to fall away. And you're left with just what is, right?
Hmm.
Just the natural world. And that's what we can work with,
Hmm.
right? That's the starting point, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to quiet down other people, like all the noise, and tune into that thing that you know you have to offer,
Hmm.
and then figuring out how to make that happen and
Hmm.
present it to the world. And
Yeah.
that's why I go to the woods. I'm in the
Yeah.
woods 3 or 4 times a week now. It's beautiful.
It's nice to just go walk in nature and like listen to the water and look at the trees and go, okay, I'm just like a tiny little speck amongst all this. And it makes everything else seem so insignificant in a good way. Like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, everything's going to be okay kind of sense.
In a right-sized way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also makes me think of that really great line from Arundhati Roy. And I'm gonna get the line wrong, but the idea I hope I get correct, which is like she says that future exists that you
Hmm.
and I are talking about. That future exists. I can hear her breathing,
Oh,
right? I can hear that future breathing. And so it's just like
yeah.
it's just right around the corner.
Hmm.
There are subtle hints for
Hmm.
those that take the time to perceive them, that we can work with to build that better future.
Yeah. Mm, I love that.
Hmm.
And I think too, it's coming, it's coming from all angles. And I also feel like, not that it's new because obviously protest art has been around forever, but it seems like there's a shift in quilting. And it could just be my perspective because of how I've curated who I follow and what I
Hmm.
consume. But people are using their art to show where their feelings are, to demonstrate how they feel about the landscape of what we're living in, and to speak out what's in their hearts, and like what they maybe don't feel like they have another way to do that. And so it's coming out in their quilting, and I'm loving to see it because I think it is such an important medium. It's got such rich historical background, and I think if we just reduce it to, well, we just make pretty things, it loses that significance. But I'm wondering if you're seeing the same. I've noted, I saw your freedom quilt, and you've done some work in that realm too, but like, yeah, I guess what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it would go back to okay. So I recently published a book, which
Yes.
I swore I'd never do, but my friend talked me into it. Catherine, hi. Um, and it's the title of the book is "The World Needs Your Next Quilt," and that speaks to the idea that you were just sharing, right? That like we have things to say, and for many of us, the best way to say those things is in textiles,
Hmm.
right? I think part of the magic there that people are intuiting or outright know is that with an object like a quilt, people think they know what it is, right? Like it's a soft thing. My grandma makes quilts, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so when they feel like they know what it is, the guard drops a little bit. And when that guard drops, then that's when you can slip a little bit of something in there
Yeah.
into that space.
Yeah.
I would also say, I would also encourage, or I would also dream that the conversation that quilt shares, engenders, fosters,
Hmm.
also has reverberating effects that cascade beyond that quilt, right? So quilts, great, love quilts. I've dedicated my life to them, obviously.
Hmm.
At the same time, we need folks on the ground doing the good work to make the better world possible. Quilts are part of the solution. The recipe is complex and there are many ingredients. Um, but I would say just whatever we have to offer, quilts and what is
Hmm.
that and? What would you put after that? Bring it all to the table because that's what I see we need as I look around the world today.
Hmm. Yeah.
So whether
Yeah.
that's pulling people together, right? Like maybe you want to start like a local sewing group, just a chance for people to get together in the same space. We realized during the pandemic how valuable and irreplaceable it is to share physical proximity to one another.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's volunteering and working at food kitchens and making sure folks that don't have steady access to food can eat, right? Maybe it's working to provide more housing options in your area. Like I don't know. I mean, there's so many things, and it's going to take all of us to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't start with quilts, and it doesn't end with quilts. Quilts are just one piece of that really big puzzle that needs solving.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's encouraging because it does, I think, like you said, it gives people the idea to go do something, right? Like, and I think that's kind of the general purpose of protest art, or just art in general, is to inspire you or to make you feel something. And so if it then encourages you to go do something about whatever that feeling was, then hopefully it's for the good and for the positive movement of your community, or wherever you choose to put your time. But yeah, I just find it so interesting, and it wasn't a piece of quilting that I ever knew about either, right? I just thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
quilts are just pretty blankets, and then I got all snooty about it for the first little bit, and then I started to relax and go, oh, you need to calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down,
Yeah.
bitch. Like it's okay.
It's
Everybody can
okay.
just
It's
make whatever they
okay.
want. Yeah. And
Turns out, and the world will not fall apart. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And so I I have to just apologize for my previous snootiness and
Recalibrate.
recalibrate, and I'm here in this space just trying to be hopefully a voice for positive change, and hopefully a platform where other people can speak about positive change and the importance that quilting has to them and to the world, because I think, like you said, it doesn't start with quilts, it doesn't end with quilts, but it's a piece of this puzzle, and it's a way we can use textiles to amplify our voices and amplify ideas and hopefully produce some results that better our community and our environment and our society as a whole. So it's really,
And well, that speaks back to the that staff that it speaks back to that soft laboratory idea that
yeah.
I was talking about a few minutes ago, which is like, okay, so there's something in the world that's like really bothering me. Like I remember one of my first like social response quilts and social response was back at the beginning of the Syrian civil war, the outbreak of that.
Mm,
And we saw just millions of mothers and fathers, grandparents, kids, aunts, uncles just walking away from their homes with whatever they could carry into
right.
countries that, for the most part, did not want them coming there. Right.
Hmm.
And I was so caught up in my feelings about all of those images and thinking about what those people might be experiencing. I didn't know what to do with all that energy, so I made a quilt out of it. Right.
Mm,
And making that quilt, soft laboratory, helped me build muscles that help me make future quilts, but also help me do other work in my community and in my world. Right.
hmm.
So it's all a training ground in my book. It's all a training ground. This is improv quilting boot camp for living. That's my new tagline.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So I do want to ask about, okay, so we've mentioned Quilty Nook, we've mentioned Seamside, we've mentioned your book. Um, so I kind of want to just like clarify some of those things. So Quilty Nook is an online community that people can join if they just want to, because
Yeah.
it's fun. And it's just at
Uh-huh.
Quilty Nook on Instagram, right?
That's a great way. Or you can, I mean, anywhere you find me on the internet, there will be links to also join the Quilty Nook. You can just Google it. I'm sure it pops up.
Okay.
But it's the Quilty Nook has just been amazing. Like it has demonstrated to me that the role of the community organizer is a lot smaller than I thought it was going into it. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of work, but
Mm,
I find that like maybe I'm more of like a little tiny lightning rod or something, right? Like it's just people just need like the merest excuse. They need somebody to put something on the calendar that they can show up to because they want to. People want to get together. People want to connect. They
yeah.
just need somebody to be like, what about this? And
Uh-huh.
so the Nook has just been beautiful. Like anything that's beautiful happening on the Nook right now, like the positive vibes and support and encouragement and like the way people just like openly share their stories. Like if you could sit in one of our Zoom based sewing circles, our conversation flows from quilts into like life, people going through real challenges, loved ones passing away, people getting sick, money being tight, whatever it is. It flows from quilts to life, back to quilts, back to life. And we just go back and forth. And there are so many moments where I just kind of pinch myself and be like, I just kind of like started that ball rolling down the hill, and all of these other people are what
Yeah.
bring the magic on a daily basis. And so that's the medical the metaphysical side of the Nook. The practical side is, yeah, it's an online community for people interested in quilts. Some
Mhm.
people are beginners, some people are long timers. We have monthly workshops with different visiting artists. We have sewing circles almost every day of the week, including on the weekend. We just have an all weekend sewing circle, so you can just come and go as you please. We have creative challenges. This year, we've been working on one called Destroy This Quilt, which is kind of an unorthodox quilt along, in which every 2 weeks I gave folks a new prompt. And it alternated between, okay, add something to your quilt top. And then the next prompt would be, now let's take something away or let's transform something.
Mm.
And we'd go back and forth throughout all the year. And so, I mean, we had people are like burning stuff, throwing stuff in the mud, cutting stuff up, and so on. I mean, people were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But the hope and the goal was uh, to get us thinking outside of our normal mental creative
Yeah.
wheel ruts. You know, I know out in your part of the country, you got those the Pioneer wagon wheel ruts in the rock sometime, right? Like they're
Yep.
durable, these patterns.
Yeah.
And so trying to just get us starting from a different starting point, altogether different starting
Hmm.
point. And what's amazing is people are still making beautiful quilts, right? Because I think that is a drive that a lot of us feel like this thing that I'm devoting time and energy to, I still want it to be beautiful, even if I've just taken a match to it or whatever it is, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so people are finding ways to work with these transformations they're incorporating in ways that are beautiful and meaningful. And
Hmm.
what I'll be really excited about is to see what happens in the Nook for the folks who've been doing the Destroy This Quilt all year long, to see what their next quilt looks like, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do they carry forth from this kind of horizon expanding experience? And what do they take with them into future pieces that have technically nothing to do with Destroy This Quilt?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of fun. It's a sweet little membership. I would encourage anybody who's interested, just check us out. There's a free trial, so you know if you're like, I don't know, let's check it out. Check it out. I would love to see you inside and show you around a little bit.
That's awesome. I love that because I think, yeah, we're hardwired for connection. And so
Mhm.
if maybe you don't have it locally, it's so great that there are places online where you can find your people. You can find the vibe that fits your life and fits your desires in your quilting journey and
Mhm.
can push you outside your boundaries. Like taking a match to a quilt. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Like
and I'm just like people do crazy stuff.
that hurts my feelings.
Yeah,
No, but
yeah.
I think that's really cool because it's a space where people are encouraged to just try something new and push the
Not be too
boundaries.
precious about it. Not be too
Yeah,
precious. It's just fabric.
it's just
Like
fabric.
that's the crazy thing about quilting is I believe that fabric is near like a sacred material. So much work has gone into it, both on the planetary level and then on the human level.
Yeah,
And at the same time, it's also just fabric, right? Like, don't stress it. It's sacred and it's not sacred. It's everything. It's all of the above. It's
yeah,
okay. It's okay.
yeah. Ooh, yeah. That's a good reminder because I think, you see the like, oh, it's out of print, so it's now I'm gonna charge $1 million for it. Or it's like, people
Mhm.
hoard the fabrics that they're too scared to cut into. And at the end of the day, you're right, it's just fucking fabric.
Just fabric. It's
Yeah.
just fabric. It's okay. You cut something up. What's the worst thing that happened? You got to sew it back together.
Hmm.
But we can do that. We know how to sew. No big deal.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I love that. And
Hmm.
so you said Seamside is coming back in 2025, and that's your
Hmm.
podcast.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
great. I'm
Yep.
excited for that.
Yep. And there have been
Um,
some wonderful conversations. And one of the things that I really, really enjoy and I'm looking forward to picking back up with, there's a variety of different episode styles, right? So, like, I would say there's some where I'm talking to other artists, like you and I are talking now. There's some where it's just me going in depth about a certain piece I've made recently.
mhm.
And then there's some called backstitches where I revisit. I call up that artist from a year ago and I say, come back on the show and tell us what you've been up to. And those are fascinating conversations
Yeah.
because we've
Oh, I
already got
bet.
that awkward first date out of the way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And now we can like just catch up in real time and see what's going on. So it's just beautiful. And I look forward to firing that Steamside machine back up in the new
yeah.
year.
How exciting. Yeah, this is seriously like such a big joy in my life podcasting because I get to talk to so many cool people. And yeah, like I
It's
just,
incredible. I mean, listen, people are real. And I think that
yeah,
that's easy to forget as they're just like scrolling by.
yeah,
People are real. They live in real places and do real things and make
yeah.
real quilts, and it's
Hmm.
beautiful when that reality comes crashing in. Well, it can be beautiful when that reality comes crashing in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, oh, okay. No, it's good. It's good. And then okay, so now your book. You talked about a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
The world needs your next quilt. So yeah, like I said, I've got my copy on order. It's not here yet. I'm waiting.
It's
Um,
coming. I'll talk to him. I'll talk to
no,
him.
no. Um, so yeah, I guess you said your friend talked you into it, but what was the encouraging piece? What was the final like, okay, I'll do it that pushed you to make your book?
I will say there were two conjoined. triggers, positive triggers. One was my friend, and I'll go back to that in a second. The other one was, the first one was a conversation that I had with another quilter at back up. The Nook holds twice a year in-person retreats that we call huddles, right? There's
Okay.
one coming up in May if folks are interested in the Smoky Mountains here in Tennessee. We rent
Ooh,
a big luxury house and we team up to make the meals. I issue a quilt challenge and then we just sit around for 4 or 5 days and just like sew and it's
yeah.
incredible. Like we're like quilty royalty for a long weekend. It's really amazing. So I was at the first huddle and I was talking to Linan, was her name, another quilter. And it was about 10 o'clock at night. And she comes into the room I was sitting in and she's like, Zach, I gotta call in the big dog on this one. I said, what's going on, Linnea? She wanted me to come look at how her quilt was coming along. I said, okay. And so she was telling me this really beautiful, rich story about what she was trying to capture in this quilt, right? Essentially, she was wanting to connect that intergenerational tie between her and her child, but also her mother, and how all three come together, right?
Mhm.
Beautiful idea. Um, but it wasn't working for her. She just had a lot of false starts, it felt like, I think it's safe to say.
Mm,
And
mm.
so I said, Linnea, I know it's kind of late, but what do you say we just start over? Right? Are you game? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And so we took her fabric and we just brushed everything aside. I said, okay, when you think of yourself as a mother, yourself as a daughter, your daughter and your mother, what colors are you seeing?
Mhm.
So we went to the color stash. We went to the fabric stash because we have a big pile of it, and we're just like pulling the colors that she's seeing. Okay, great. We got our colors. All right. What shapes are you seeing?
Mm.
Right? Are they soft shapes? Are they sharp shapes? Are they simple? Are they complex? Are they ripped? Are they cut? Are they patterned? Are they organic? Like all these things.
Yeah,
And so she settled on kind of like these organic circles for the most part.
sure.
How many do we need? Well, obviously we needed three, one for her mom, one for her daughter. And so we just kept kind of going through, we broke down the quilt making process into just a series of step by step decisions. And
Yeah.
each step, each choice that we got to make, we were taking it back to our narrative, right? And we're saying, okay, so how can this choice support my narrative? If I want to talk about intergenerational connections, how can colors do that? How can shapes do that? How can composition do that? How can materials do that? How can my quilting do that? How can the binding, which a lot of people is just kind of like a almost a throwaway decision because we do it the same way every time, right? How can my binding reinforce the narrative, right? So really trying to think through how can I tell a rich, layered, nuanced story, in this case about intergenerational connections,
Mhm.
through every single decision I make in this quilt. And so we had a really beautiful late night moment there at the huddle, me and Linan. She came out with a quilt that is spectacular, that she is so
Mm.
proud of. And I'm like, Linan, I think this conversation needs to be a book, right? So the world needs your next quilt. There it is. It just kind of like lived in my brain though until Catherine, fast forward to the other motivator in this project.
Mm.
I was visiting her in Western Massachusetts. Catherine Greenwood Swanson might be a name that folks are familiar with. She's a powerhouse, steam engine, freight train, and a creative marvel. She's all of the above. She runs Swanson's Fabrics, and
Mhm.
it's a creative reuse place where everything is, I believe, now $5 a yard, no matter whether it's like polyester or fine silk, right? It is a
Yeah.
very egalitarian creative reuse shop. Anyway, so I was visiting her at her home, and she showed me this beautiful risograph printed coil bound calendar that a local print shop had made and she had purchased. I was like, oh, that was the missing piece for me because I wasn't like immediately warm to the idea of like just going to a big publisher and just like ceding over that much control. And I was like, oh, I love the idea of working with a small press. And so
Yeah.
that's where I caught the glimmer. And so I worked with my friend Alicia Mann, who is a weaver and a printmaker in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Mhm.
And we risographed each of those pages. We letterpressed the covers. What did we do? Coil bound, screen printed. I mean, there's so many details that went into what we now call the collector's edition. Because
Mhm.
but she said, Zach, if I'd realized how much work we're going to put into this, we'd have tripled the price. And I'm like, I know, it was a lot of work. Uh, but now, thankfully, so that's the collector's edition. Those are sold out. Sorry,
Yeah.
folks. But now we have the citizens edition or the people's edition, I don't know what we're going to call it, that is mass produced at someone close to Catherine in Western Massachusetts. So those are still beautiful, all the same
Mhm.
great content, just not like requiring hours and hours and hours of me and Alicia's life energy. and,
Yeah.
and you can order that through Swanson, through my shop, and it'll be sent through Swanson's fabrics.
Yeah.
And it's just been a marvel. I mean, there's nothing like writing a book to help me clarify my own thoughts about
Mhm.
the quilt making process. But then also, like, it's just sweet to think, like, well, somebody at another huddle ended up getting sick and had to just like kind of like lay in bed one day. And I was
Mm.
like, here, baby, take my book. You know, like
Mhm.
it was born in a huddle, so it makes sense that you would sit here and read it in the huddle. And she said, Zach, it felt like the huddle in a bed. You know, like it's just really
Oh.
sweet. Like I was just right there,
Yeah.
going step by step. So it's been a beautiful process, and I feel very proud to have um to bring an offering like that into the world.
Yeah. That's incredible. I'm so excited to get mine because
Mhm.
I'm ready to branch out. I think I've stuck with other people's patterns and like improv kind of gives me a heart attack. But like I've watched my mom all this time, like she can take any pile of scraps and turn it into a quilt. It is bonkers to me, the things that woman can do. And just seeing your work and seeing, Maddie, the badass quilter, like seeing her work, like just and Erin at Seam Ripper Society, like she's using all thrifted materials too most of the time. And just those limitations are almost what gives you permission to make something different and new because you can't just follow someone else's pattern and someone else's requirements. You have to make your own. And so I'm just really, really looking forward to it. So thank you for making it and putting it out in the world. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I'm of the mindset, like, yeah, my personal, like it's funny. I see so many beautiful quilts out there, and some of them are so far beyond anything I would ever personally make. But it
mhm,
doesn't mean I'm not like literally, that sounds gross. I was going to say literally drooling over them. But like, you know, like I can
yeah,
really appreciate a traditional pattern quilt, for example, right?
yeah, yes,
For just that beautiful repetition of pattern, or maybe the
mhm,
color choices of quilter, whatever it is, right? The
mm,
texture of the hand quilt, whatever it is.
yeah,
But I'm not, that's not what I'm going to crank out. You know, I crank
right.
out something different, right? But there's so many beautiful things out there in the quilt
Mhm,
world. And so my hope when in writing this book was, okay, here's my approach, but my approach, at least on a theoretical level, is one that includes all kinds of quilts,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So there should be something in there for everybody. That's the hope, at least.
yeah. That's amazing. And yeah, it's being able to appreciate quilting as a whole and then what you will do. It's like we all have our own little niche or our own little nook inside of the quilting world. And so it's it's just endlessly fascinating to me what people make and to continue to see the art that people create and want to put out and how people morph and shift as they find things that speak to them in the way that certain skills or certain types of fabrics or certain shapes sing to them and watching that come to life is just I've like as far as a hobby or a craft or something, you know, that I've made, I've never had anything be quite so soul wrenching as quilting. So it's just been so incredible to be in this space and to get to talk to other quilters and hear about what makes their heart sing as far as what you found in quilting, what your avenue is. And so it's just really, really grateful for all this and really grateful for this time with you today. And I'm just really looking forward to your book and to hopefully one day we can meet up and
Oh, it'd be
share some
wonderful.
space and, you
Yeah.
know, maybe in the mountains of Tennessee, but who knows?
Or by the river in Boise.
Or by the river in Boise, because,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but I have an Airbnb. No, I'm just kidding.
Link in bio.
Yeah, go check it out. Um, anyway, well, thank you so much again for being here today with me. And I've just really loved this. But before we wrap this up, I want to know if you have like a tip or an offering of advice for, it doesn't have to just be for new quilters, but just something that kind of maybe helped you or
Flashlight. The way a flashlight works is it only shines so far down the path You can't see the whole path. You just see what you need to take the next step, and eventually you will get to where you're going.
Mhm.
Quilt making, especially improv quilting, can be the same way. And I would encourage us not to try to see all the way through the dark woods to the home we're trying to get to in the middle of the night that we can't even see because we're so far away.
Mhm.
But just shine our little light where we're at now, make one decision, then make a second, then make a third. And by layering and stacking your decisions one on top of the other, they will be internally consistent, they will speak to one another, and you will come out with something beautiful in a way that might feel um, like it just came out of nowhere. But
Yeah.
no, it didn't. It came out of you. And so I would encourage folks to try to front load as little as possible in the terms of decision making and just go on a walk with fabric, see what
Yeah.
happens.
Mm, I love that. That's awesome. And yeah, one step at a time, right? It's how we get anywhere.
That's it. That's it.
Nice. Well, thank you again. And if people don't know where to find you online, it's zakfoster.com.
ZakFoster.com. Just remember,
Okay,
Zak is Z-A-K. There's no C, there's no H. I don't know why. Ask my mama, but ZakFoster.com.
perfect. And that's where they can get to all the things,
Everything. Oh, so
all
many of
the
the things.
things. Okay. Well, hopefully people will check out your book and check out the Nook, and we'll look forward to Streamside in 2025. And
Thank you for this time to sit and think through the role, the magic, and the power and the agency of quilts in this world. It's been a couple of months since I've sat down and had a similar conversation. And so it's been nice to like, oh, I can tell my files have been updating this whole time. Told
right.
you some new stories this morning. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.